Christmas Eve, 2019. One of America's wealthiest men collapsed in his mansion, his skin turning cold as stone, his pulse fading with every passing minute. Witnesses heard a woman scream. Security footage showed a shadowy figure at the door. But the strangest part wasn't how he fell. It was who saved him. A girl with nothing. And the truth behind what really happened that night is darker than anyone imagined. This is the story of Marcus Ashford, a 58-year-old real estate billionaire worth over $3 billion, who collapsed on Christmas Eve under circumstances that left doctors baffled and investigators scrambling for answers. For weeks, the media speculated. Was it a heart attack? Poisoning? An elaborate setup? But the real mystery wasn't medical. It was the girl who found him. Elena Martinez, 24 years old, is a waitress living paycheck to paycheck in a shelter 3 miles from his estate. She had no connection to him, no reason to be at his mansion that night. Yet when paramedics arrived, she was the one holding his hand, keeping him alive. What happened inside that mansion? Why did Marcus Ashford, a man who'd built an empire on ruthlessness, collapse the moment she walked through his door? And why, when he finally woke up, did he say 5 words that changed everything? I've been waiting for you. To understand this story, we have to go back 30 years, to the night a curse was born. Marcus Ashford wasn't born into wealth. He grew up in South Boston in the 1970s, the son of a factory worker and a seamstress. His childhood was marked by hunger, hand-me-down clothes, and the constant hum of financial anxiety that never quite left. Even after he made his first million. By the time he was 30, Marcus had transformed himself. Harvard Business School, high-stakes real estate deals, luxury resorts from Miami to Aspen. He was brilliant, calculating, and utterly ruthless. People who worked with him described a man who saw the world in terms of transactions. Everything had a price. Everyone could be bought or replaced. But those who knew him in his early years remembered something else. They remembered a young Marcus, softer around the edges, who'd fallen in love with a girl named Elena Martinez when he was 28 years old. Sophia worked at a diner near his first office in Boston. She was 23, Puerto Rican, bright-eyed, and completely unimpressed by his ambition. She liked the version of Marcus who showed up at 2 a.m. after closing a deal, exhausted and vulnerable, ordering coffee and talking about his dreams. For 2 years, they were inseparable. Marcus talked about marriage. Sophia believed him. But Marcus's family had other plans. Old money doesn't marry diner waitresses. His mother made it clear that if Marcus wanted access to the family trust, the connections that would launch his empire, he needed to marry within their social circle. On Christmas Eve, 1989, Marcus made his choice. He took Sophia to dinner at an expensive restaurant, somewhere she'd never been, somewhere that made her feel small and out of place. And then he told her it was over, that he was engaged to someone else, that it had been decided. Sophia didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stared at him across the table, her face unreadable, and then she stood up. She walked out into a snowstorm without her coat. Marcus let her go. 3 weeks later, Sophia was found unconscious in an alley, suffering from severe pneumonia and hypothermia. She'd been living on the streets, too proud to go back to her family, too broken to ask for help. She survived, barely, but the damage was done. Her lungs were permanently scarred. She could never work full shifts again. And she was 3 months pregnant. Sophia never told Marcus about the baby. She raised her daughter, Elena, alone, working part-time jobs, relying on community support, and never once speaking Marcus Ashford's name. But before Sophia died in 2015 from complications related to her weakened lungs, she told her daughter the truth. About Marcus. About the life he'd stolen from them. And about the words she'd whispered into the winter wind the night he abandoned her. Let your wealth turn you cold, until a heart warmer than yours melts you. Elena didn't believe in curses, but she believed in injustice, and for 4 years after her mother's death, she carried that story like a stone in her chest, working double shifts at a diner not far from where her mother had once worked, trying to survive in a city that had no mercy for people like her. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Christmas Eve, 2019. Marcus Ashford was alone in his mansion, a sprawling 15,000 square foot estate on the Massachusetts coast. He'd been alone for years, really. 2 failed marriages, no children, a staff that feared him more than respected him. He'd spent the evening in his study, going over contracts, the way he spent every Christmas. But something was different that night. Marcus felt wrong. His chest is tight. His skin was cold, despite the roaring fireplace. He dismissed it at first. Stress. Age. The weight of decades spent building an empire that had never made him happy. But by 10 p.m., he could barely stand. His hands were stiff, fingers curling involuntarily. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't recognize himself. He tried to call for help, but his phone was downstairs. He made it to the hallway before his legs gave out. That's when the doorbell rang. Elena Martinez hadn't planned to be at the Ashford estate that night. She'd been delivering donated blankets to homeless shelters, a volunteer effort organized by the community center, where she sometimes stayed. The storm had gotten worse, and she'd taken a wrong turn, ending up on a private road she didn't recognize. She saw the lights of the mansion through the snow and thought maybe someone could give her directions. The front gate was open. Unusual, but not alarming. She walked up the long driveway, her boots crunching in the snow, and rang the bell. No answer. She tried again. Nothing. She was about to leave when she heard a sound, a groan, faint but desperate. She tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the mansion was silent except for the crackling of a fire somewhere deep in the house. Elena called out. No response. She followed the sound down a long hallway, lined with expensive art and cold marble floors. And then she saw him. Marcus Ashford collapsed on the floor, his face twisted in pain, his skin an unnatural shade of gray. Elena didn't know who he was. She'd never seen his face before, never followed the news about billionaires and real estate moguls. All she saw was a man dying. She dropped to her knees beside him, checking for a pulse. It was there, but weak, erratic. She pulled out her phone and called 911, her voice shaking as she gave the address. While she waited, she did the only thing she could think of. She held his hand. Marcus's eyes fluttered open. He stared at her, confused, disoriented. And then something shifted in his expression. Recognition, not of her face, but of something deeper. Sophia, he whispered. Elena froze. That was her mother's name. No, she said, her voice barely audible. I'm Elena. Marcus's grip tightened on her hand, his eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. And then he passed out. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes later. They found Elena still holding his hand, her face pale, her mind racing. They asked her who she was, how she knew him. She told them the truth. She didn't. They loaded Marcus into the ambulance. One of the paramedics told her she'd saved his life, that if she hadn't found him when she did, he would have died. Elena stood in the snow, watching the ambulance disappear, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. A pull, like an invisible thread connecting her to this man she didn't know. By the next morning, the story had exploded. Billionaire Marcus Ashford, found collapsed in his mansion on Christmas Eve, was saved by a mysterious young woman. The media descended, Reporters camped outside the hospital. Speculation ran wild. Some outlets suggested foul play. Others hinted at a romantic scandal. A few, reaching for sensationalism, even mentioned the word curse. Elena was thrust into the spotlight against her will. Journalists tracked her down at the shelter where she'd been staying. They wanted interviews, photographs, her story. She refused, but the attention didn't stop. Police questioned her twice. They asked about her relationship with Marcus. How did she know where he lived? Why was she at his mansion that night? Elena told them the truth, but the truth sounded thin. A wrong turn? A coincidence? Investigators weren't convinced. They pulled her background, found out about her mother, found out about Sophia Martinez and her connection to Marcus Ashford 30 years earlier. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Was this revenge? Had Elena planned this? Did she poison him and then call 911 to cover her tracks? The speculation was vicious. Elena's name was dragged through the mud by tabloids and online commentators who knew nothing about her life, her struggles, her grief. Meanwhile, Marcus remained in the hospital, his condition stabilizing but still critical. Doctors were baffled. His symptoms didn't match any known illness or toxin. His blood work was clean. But his body showed signs of extreme physiological stress, as if he'd been shutting down from the inside out. One cardiologist, off the record, told a reporter that it looked less like a medical event and more like the body giving up. Like Marcus Ashford had been dying not from disease, but from something deeper. Grief, maybe. Or guilt. Elena avoided the media circus as much as she could, but the story wouldn't let her go. And then, 2 weeks after Christmas, Marcus Ashford woke up. The first thing he did was ask for her. If this part is making sense, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's really watching to this point. Elena didn't want to go. She'd spent 2 weeks being accused, scrutinized, and judged for something she didn't understand. But Marcus's lawyer was persistent. He told her that Marcus wanted to explain. He needed to tell her the truth. Against her better judgment, she agreed. The hospital room was private, quiet. Marcus looked older than he had that night, his face drawn, his eyes heavy with something that looked like decades of exhaustion. When Elena walked in, he tried to sit up straighter. She stayed by the door, arms crossed, guarded. "You knew my mother," she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. "I loved her," he said quietly, "and I destroyed her." For the next hour, Marcus told Elena everything. About Sophia, about their relationship, about the choice he'd made on Christmas Eve 30 years ago, the choice that had haunted him every day since. He told her about the empire he'd built, the wealth he'd accumulated, and how none of it had ever filled the hole he'd created when he walked away from the only person who'd ever truly known him. He told her about the Christmases that followed, how every year something went wrong. Business deals collapsed, partnerships fractured. People he trusted betrayed him. At first, he thought it was a coincidence, but as the years passed, the pattern became undeniable. Every Christmas Eve, something broke. "I started to believe I was cursed," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. That Sophia's anger had followed me, that I deserved every bit of suffering I got. Elena didn't respond. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to walk out. This man had ruined her mother's life, stolen her future, and left her to struggle alone. But another part of her, the part that had held his hand in that hallway, couldn't ignore the pain in his voice. Marcus continued. "When I saw you that night, I thought I was hallucinating. You look just like her. The same eyes, the same way of holding yourself. And when you told me your name, I knew. I knew Sophia had a daughter, and I knew I'd failed her in every way that mattered." He paused, his hands trembling. I've spent 30 years trying to outrun what I did, and it almost killed me. Elena finally spoke. My mother told me about you before she died. She told me you were the reason we had nothing, that you chose money over her, over us. Marcus closed his eyes. She was right. Then why should I care? Elena's voice cracked. Why should I care that you're sorry now, when it's too late? When she's gone? Marcus opened his eyes, and for the first time, Elena saw something she hadn't expected. Not justification, not excuses, just the raw, unfiltered truth of a man who'd lost everything that mattered. You shouldn't, he said. You shouldn't care. You shouldn't forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that your mother was the best thing that ever happened to me. And losing her was the worst decision I ever made. And if I could go back, if I could change it, I would give up everything just to tell her I was wrong. Elena visited Marcus 3 more times over the next month. Not because she forgave him, not because she wanted his money or his apologies, but because she needed to understand. She needed to see if there was anything real beneath the guilt, or if this was just another transaction for a man who'd spent his life trading in them. What she found surprised her. Marcus had changed, not in the dramatic Hollywood sense, but in small, quiet ways. He'd started donating to shelters, not publicly, not for tax breaks, just quietly, through his lawyer, funding the kinds of places where Elena and her mother had once stayed. He'd set up a trust in Sophia's name, funding scholarships for young women from low-income backgrounds who wanted to go to college. And he'd begun the process of dismantling parts of his empire, selling off properties, redirecting wealth toward causes that actually mattered. Elena didn't know if it was enough. She didn't know if anything could ever be enough. But she saw the effort. And slowly, carefully, she let herself believe that people could change. Not because they deserved redemption, but because the alternative, carrying hate forever, was too heavy. One afternoon in late February, Elena and Marcus sat in his hospital room, and he asked her a question. What do you want to do with your life? Elena blinked. No one had ever asked her that before. Her life had always been about survival, not dreams. I don't know, she said honestly. I've never had the chance to think about it. Marcus nodded. Then think about it now. And when you know, tell me. I'll help you get there. Not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness, but because it's what I should have done for your mother. 3 months later, Elena enrolled in community college, business administration. She didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in her life, she had the space to find out. Marcus continued his recovery, both physical and emotional. He never fully regained his health. The damage from that night left him weaker, slower, and more aware of his mortality. But he seemed lighter, like a weight he'd been carrying for decades had finally lifted. They stayed in touch, not as family, not even as friends, really, but as 2 people connected by tragedy who'd chosen, against all odds, to move forward. Elena never called it forgiveness. She wasn't sure she ever would. But she called it something else, a choice, the choice her mother never got to make, the choice to let go of the past, not for Marcus's sake, but for her own. This is the story of Marcus Ashford and Elena Martinez, a billionaire and a waitress, a man haunted by his choices and a woman shaped by their consequences. Some people believe in curses, that the universe punishes those who do wrong, that guilt can manifest in ways we don't understand. Others believe in coincidence, that Marcus's collapse was medical, explainable, and unrelated to the past. But maybe the truth is somewhere in between. Maybe curses aren't magic. Maybe they're just the weight of our choices, carried for so long that they eventually break us. And maybe redemption isn't about grand gestures or perfect endings. Maybe it's about showing up, doing the work, and hoping that somewhere along the way, you become someone your younger self wouldn't be ashamed of. So here's the question I want to leave you with. If you were in Elena's position, would you have forgiven him? Or would you have walked away? And if you were Marcus, would you have had the courage to face what you'd done? Or would you have kept running? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think. And if this story made you feel something, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more stories like this coming. Stories that make you think, that challenge you, that remind you we're all just trying to figure it out. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the choices we make today become the lives we live tomorrow.